5 out of 6 charges here in federal court in Manhattan. It was 6 days of jury deliberations and about 40 hours inside of that room here in Manhattan as the jury continued to deliberate, even asking for a whiteboard, some pens and paper as they went through those counts bit by bit. So when the verdict was read, Maxwell sitting in court pretty much motionless, didn't have much of a reaction there. And then she left the courtroom. Maxwell was facing 6 federal charges, including child sex trafficking and sex trafficking conspiracy charges. Prosecutors say she groomed and trafficked underage girls as young as 14 years old to be sexually abused by her former boyfriend, Jeffrey Epstein. The jury then requesting copies of the testimony from all 4 of her accusers after a long holiday break and asking the judge to clarify the definition of enticement, which is part of 2 of the charges Maxwell was facing. During the more than 2 weeks of graphic testimony here in Manhattan, the court heard from 4 women who say they were all underage when Maxwell tricked them into being sexually abused. Her lawyers telling jurors that Maxwell should not be the scapegoat for Epstein's case. Following that verdict, U.S. Attorney for the Southern District praising the women who were brave enough to come forward.
A unanimous jury has found Ghislaine Maxwell guilty of one of the worst crimes imaginable: facilitating and participating in the sexual abuse of children, crimes that she committed with her longtime partner and co-conspirator, Jeffrey Epstein. The road to justice has been far too long, but today, justice has been done.
Now, Brett, Ghislaine Maxwell facing 65 years in prison after being sentenced here in Manhattan in federal court. The judge has not set a date yet for sentencing. Brett?
Alexis, she did not take the stand in this case. And there were thoughts about whether the prosecution played it right by only focusing on 4 of the victims when there are obviously dozens and dozens who were talked about. Have they talked about the strategy there?
Brett, not yet tonight, but we're waiting here in front of that federal court to see if any of the lawyers on either side come out to talk a little bit about how they believe things played out here in that federal courtroom. But those 4 women who were brave enough to get up there and take the stand and talk about all the things that they say went on over about a decade of reported abuse, talked about very specific allegations, talked about how Maxwell was either partaking in the abuse sometimes or just in the room watching it. So it was very graphic testimony here over that 3-week trial for the Ghislaine Maxwell sex trafficking case. Brett?
And last thing, she's facing a number of years, likely, if you look at the minimum standards, the rest of her life. When is it that sentencing? Do we know the date yet?
Yeah, well, she turned 60 just over the weekend, celebrating Christmas and her 60th birthday behind bars in that federal prison. But she has not yet learned when she will be officially sentenced. There was obviously a big push here by some of the people in the courtroom to get this moving along, especially with the sentencing due to COVID concerns. So it could be that we're going to want that to move along as well for the sentencing. But it's just going to have to wait and see how it plays out here in federal court, Brett.